Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 789B. And today's date is October 12th, 2015. And the title of this episode is The Bombing in Turkey Used as the Excuse to Bring in NATO Troops into Turkey. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I'll be uploading an interview with Harley Schlanger. If you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, you will receive an email. If you signed up to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, YouTube should send you an email. If not, you can come right over to YouTube. Just type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, and you'll see the video on the right-hand side. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, out in Chicago, there's a Supreme Court decision that's going to happen this week. It's about banning firearms commonly known as assault weapons, and this is very critical. If the court agrees to hear the case, it would cast a shadow over similar bans in several states, but declining to take it up would boost efforts to impose such bans elsewhere. And what are the bans? Well, this is the law after Sandy Hook, where they decided to have 10 rounds and ban the AR-15. And the Supreme Court could announce as early as Tuesday whether we'll hear a challenge to the suburban Chicago law banning firearms, commonly known as assault weapons. And gun rights activists are challenging a 2013 law passed in Highland Park, Illinois, that bans the sale, purchase, or possession of semi-automatic weapons that can hold more than 10 rounds in a single ammunition clip or magazine. In passing the law, city officials cited the 2012 shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut and a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. And the ban also lists other type of assault-style firearms. The Supreme Court decision ruling said that the Constitution's Second Amendment provides an individual right to own a handgun for self-defense. Well, that's not really the Second Amendment. It doesn't specify. It says arms. And arms means the same weapon the military possesses. And they're saying, well, that, they can have a handgun for self-defense, but dangerous and unusual weapons can be restricted. Well, the Second Amendment doesn't say anything. They're just making this up. The Second Amendment says we can bear arms. That means to carry, to have arms, any weapon that the military has. And we're seeing right now that they're trying to do whatever they possibly can to take the weapons away from the people. And in a recent article by Dr. Ignatius Piazza from the Front Sight Firearms Training Institute examines the reasons behind the push against personal firearm ownership in America and why anti-gun proponents like Obama refuse to address other deadly issues that cause far more deaths than guns. And they're saying that guns are not responsible for the deaths of people. It's actually the person. And it's funny because they gave the same exact example that I give, because in car accidents, 395 deaths over Labor Day weekend were reported. That's right, 395 men, women, children were killed over Labor Day in car accidents. Why didn't Obama hold a press conference in the day after Labor Day? Expressing his grief, his anger. And why didn't we just blame the car? It was the car's fault. And then start stripping the car away from all the people. Because we know it was the driver that caused the accidents. It wasn't the inanimate object. So what they're saying is maybe we're looking in the wrong place, which we are, because they don't want you to look at the people, the mentally disturbed people who are on SSRIs, on medications, who are then pushed by the FBI to do things they normally wouldn't do. And this is what we're seeing. But the question is, why? because banning the manufacture and sale of automobiles or alcohol or recreational and pharmaceutical drugs or getting rid of all the national holidays does not fit his agenda to disarm the American public. That's why those aren't an issue. Just like all the cases where people are killing people with knives, you don't hear about that. They're not out there pushing the idea that we need to get rid of knives, at least not yet. But we have to go back to our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, where he said, "Laws that forbid the carrying of arms disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than prevent homicides. For an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed one." And we can see at this point in time that the shootings die down once they get the laws they want. I mean, if you look at the UK, you look at Australia, as soon as they got the weapons from the people still have weapons there, but they got the laws that they wanted, everything started to die down. If they want more laws, we see they ramp things back up. And we're already hearing warnings in the UK, and we're hearing warnings in Australia. The University of New South Wales in Sydney warned that police are responding to shooting threat published on the same exact anonymous site, 4chan, that the shooter in Oregon was on. And they're hearing someone talk about having some type of mass shooting in this area, and they're on high alert. But as President Obama says, this can't happen because they have these gun laws. Gun laws make it so this stuff doesn't happen. But here are their warnings saying that it could happen. So wait, I'm confused. And when it does happen, and I'm going to say when it does, because they want to push this to the bitter end. They got a little bit, now they're going for more. This is what happens until they get all the weapons away from the people. And every time they want to push their agenda, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they say we need more of these gun laws. Because they told us the other set was going to be enough, and then it isn't because they push their agenda, and then they tell us we need more of it, instead of looking at why this is really happening. And it's really happening because a lot of this is set up. Just like everything else that they tell us is a lie. The economic information, all the numbers they put out there, lies. What we're doing in Syria, a lie. What we're doing in Iraq, a lie. What we're doing in Yemen, a lie. What we're doing in Ukraine, a lie. They're always lying to the people. Because if people knew the truth, they would have riots in the street and they would come for their heads. Because nobody wants to fight for the bankers. And this is why they keep this a secret, because they have certain agendas. They're taking their orders from the central bankers. And the central bankers have no allegiance to a country or group. Their allegiance is to debt and to themselves and profit. That is it. And of course, control of the world. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that NATO is going to help Ukraine regain control over its airspace. And we see at this point in time, Ukraine is making it seem like they're adhering to the Minsk II ceasefire. And they're keeping up this illusion, and they'll keep this up until the very end, once it expires at the end of the year. Now we see Obama is getting ready to send ships to China to provoke China into doing something. It's a U.S. official already indicated that the operation could come within days. The question now is whether China will respond to such operations. Now, they know what's going on here. They realize the United States is provoking. They want them to do something. They're hoping that China will react. And we'll have to wait to see what happens. Hopefully China understands what's going on and will just let the ships sail around the islands, and that's it. And they'll give some warnings and they'll speak out, but hopefully that is it, because right at this point, we don't need World War III, even though they're going to continually try to push this. And if they can't get China, Russia, North Korea, Syria, Iran, or any of the other countries to do what they want them to do, they will push a false flag event and blame it on that country. Because they need a war. They need to cover up this collapse. And time, well, that's it. They don't have any more time. And they know this. Now, out in Romania, the U.S. and the Romanian government, they are preparing to deploy a missile defense facility in Romania, the Mk-41 system. And Russia is saying this is a breach of Intermediate Ranger Nuclear Forces Treaty. And if they do this, they're going to break the treaty, and they will consider this a provocation, which is exactly what the U.S. wants. They want to provoke Russia. They want to have them do something. And if you notice, they're continually poking all throughout Eastern Europe, in the Baltics, in Ukraine, in every region they possibly can. The U.S. is in the Pacific, poking at China, hoping these two powers will eventually do something. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand that things in Yemen, in Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, completely falling apart now. The U.S. government, central bankers, they are in a corner. They're boxed in. They don't know what to do at this point. Russia is ruining their plans. And we see Saudi Arabia right now is continually bombing in Yemen. They just hit another wedding party. And of course, Saudi Arabia, they are crowned head of UN Human Rights Panel, and they're destroying and hitting civilians. They know exactly what they're hitting. They know they're hitting civilians because they're trying to get the people to say, I give. We will take back our puppet government and we will never do this again. This is why they're continually hitting the civilians in Yemen. Now, out in Libya, we understand the UN is trying to push a peace deal. They want both governments, the elected government in Tripoli and the puppet government, which is now kicked out of Tripoli, to form a one unified government. And what they're really trying to do is basically get rid of the elected government in Tripoli and basically give all the power to the puppet government. And the Tripoli-based government is saying they want additional amendments to the UN proposed peace agreement for Libya. And they're saying that, you know something, if you can't give us this whole plan is about divisions, not unity, and we're going to back out. And it looks like this peace deal is going down the toilet right now. And we have to remember something very important, where John Kerry and others have said if they cannot work something out by October 20th, something is going to happen. And we've had warnings already in Libya for all Americans to get out, because they didn't know if this was going to work or not. And if it doesn't, we know they're going to go into Libya. Now, does this mean the U.S. is going to go in there? Most likely not. They don't have authorization, because the authorization for war is still pending in Congress. So it looks like they've been planning building for other nations to go in as their proxy. I wouldn't be surprised if they even had paid mercenaries standing by. And we're going to have to watch this situation very carefully, because what's happening right now is, since Russia is in Syria and destroying the Islamic State, this is a problem because we know the Islamic State is a proxy army for the United States government central bankers. And once Russia removes the threat in Syria, other countries are already saying, listen, can you come into our country and get rid of this threat? And if they do this, there'll be no more terror. Right? Because if we get rid of the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, the government would have to give us all our rights back. We wouldn't have to be subjected to pat-downs in the airports, and we wouldn't need any of all this surveillance. Just get rid of it. Because that means that Russia won the war on terror. But we know this is not going to happen. They'll never, ever let it get that far. And we can see already in Turkey, where they had this bombing over the weekend, 130 people were killed on Saturday. Remember, false flags, they do not mean that people do not die. People do die. Yes, sometimes they are fake, phony, and false. And then sometimes they are very real. And this bombing had multiple agendas to it. One, to postpone the election in Turkey. The other, they're trying to frame this on the Islamic State. Now, why would they do that? Because we know Turkey supports them. We understand that's where they're trained, that's where they're housed. But to the rest of the world, they're going to make it look like Turkey's being attacked by the Islamic State. And if this happens, this will allow NATO to bring in troops in Turkey, because already NATO is saying that they are ready to react proportionately to the recent attacks. Because guess what? Turkey has the right to defend themselves. And this is the excuse they always use. So NATO right now is looking to bring in troops, and they're making the case of why they can go into Syria now and go after, not the Islamic State, but now go after Assad. They want to get involved on a larger scale. That's right, to start up World War III. This is what's happening at this point. We're reaching a tipping point. And we're getting so close now that one little thing will set off World War III. Now, because of the bombing inside Turkey, Russia was supposed to fly over Turkey under the Open Skies Treaty. And Turkey said, you know something, we better postpone this. We don't really want you flying over the country. It might not be safe, but they still have commercial airplanes flying over the country. So why is this going to be a problem at this point? I don't think they want them to see certain things in the country, and I don't think they want them to report on it. So they're not having them fly over the country on October 12th, which is today. Now, Putin and the Saudi defense minister met in Russia, and they agreed on common goals in Syria. Now, it looks like a lot of these countries, like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, they're caught between the West and the East. And a lot of these countries realize that the dollar is doomed, and they're starting to make deals with Russia, China, and they're moving closer and closer to Russia and China. We see Germany and France, they're also doing this. So they're playing both sides at this point. And they've come to an agreement that, yes, we need to get rid of the terrorism that's in Syria. And remember, if the dollar fails and they go to Russia, they don't need the United States anymore. And they don't really care about Assad at that point. And we're going to have to watch that situation very, very closely. Now, the Syrian army has made huge gains in Aleppo. They have seized an oil field that was being held by the Islamic State. And we can see that Russia, just in the last couple of weeks, has done more damage to the proxy army of the United States government central bankers than 11 other countries in the coalition when they were bombing in Syria. They have done more than 11 other countries. I mean, over 40% of the Islamic State infrastructure destroyed. 110 Islamic State targets in Syria destroyed. And what's very interesting about all this, in Britain, 70% support what Putin is doing in Syria. Now, the United States government, they're doing whatever they possibly can to help the Free Syrian Army, which is really the Islamic State. They're one and the same. They flew in U.S. military cargo planes, dropped about 50 tons of ammunition to the rebel groups overnight in northern Syria. And they are trying to help in any way, but it's getting harder and harder to do so. They're losing their grip on Syria. And this is what we need to be nervous about. And a former CIA officer saying basically what we already know. The U.S. Congress arms the Islamic State extremists. They provide them weapons. They say they're giving it to the Free Syrian Army. The Free Syrian Army then passes it along to the Islamic State. Well, the Free Syrian Army is really like a phantom army at this point because they were using the Islamic State as their force to go after Assad. And this is why Russia is having a very hard time finding the Free Syrian Army. Now, remember when Ashton Carter said that Russia better be careful because there could be a terrorist attack inside Russia? Well, it looks like a group of people were plotting a terrorist attack in Russia. Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee found the gunmen where they were hiding. They had self-made explosive devices. And they reported that they were going to attack a Moscow public transport. And they received financial resources and elements and everything that they needed from the militant group. Now, think about this for a second. The militant group is controlled by the United States government because it is their terrorist group. It is their proxy army. They gave them devices, funds to pull this off in Russia. So the United States government central bankers, they are pushing terror in other countries now. So basically what they're saying is the United States is the terrorists. From their actions, the United States government central bankers are now the terrorists around the world. Now, out of the Sovereign Man website, Simon Black said there's 3 obvious signs the entire system is changing. The dominant international force in the Middle East now is no longer the United States. It is Russia. And this just happened in the last few weeks. China has launched its own competitive international banking network. So for more than 7 decades, the U.S. banking system basically was the global banking system. Now we see that China has created the CIPS, the China International Payment System. And basically, they have many countries signing up and many banks signing up to the system. So if this system is successful, CIPS could take away substantial market share from the U.S. banking system, giving foreign banks and governments less and less reason to hold U.S. dollars and U.S. government debt. There's an epic revolution in the global financial system right now. People are turning to other currencies, electronic currencies, turning toward gold and silver, the yuan, renminbi, ruble, their own currency. And this is why the United States government central bankers are pushing so hard to start World War III. Because how long do you think it will be until China's payment system, Russia's payment system is successful and people start using that? Now, without countries using the SWIFT system or using both systems, the United States government central bankers cannot put pressure on these countries. And if they go fully over to CIPS, guess what? There's no reason to use the dollar anymore. And we see that this whole entire system is about to come down. John Kerry already told us about this. Through the negotiations in Iran, if we don't get in there, the dollar collapses. Well, guess what? The dollar is collapsing no matter what. They know this. And they're running out of time. And we're going to see them push war as hard as they possibly can, and it's going to accelerate as time goes on. As the collapse accelerates and more countries move away from the system and they can't maintain the illusionary numbers, guess what? They're going to go full force into starting World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.